The metal walls of Space Station Omega-7 felt colder than usual as Jack Stone walked down the long corridor to the director's office. His boots made soft clicking sounds against the floor, echoing in the empty hallway. The message he had received was short. Report immediately. New assignment. That usually meant trouble. Jack ran his hand through his short brown hair, a habit he had picked up during his 10 years as a space ranger. At 32, he was younger than most senior rangers, but his record spoke for itself. He had a knack for handling difficult situations, especially when it came to dealing with alien species. Still, something about this summons felt different. The door to Director Morrison's office slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, Jack found not just the director, but also 3 other people. The station's head of security, the chief medical officer, and someone he didn't recognize wearing a science division uniform. Ranger Stone, Director Morrison said, his voice grave. Thank you for coming quickly. He gestured to an empty chair. Please, sit down. The lighting in the office dimmed, and a holographic display flickered to life in the center of the room. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The image showed a creature he had only seen in training videos, a shadow stalker. Its black, sleek form seemed to absorb the light around it. Even in the hologram, its 6 limbs moved with terrifying grace, and its elongated head housed rows of sensors that glowed with a faint blue light. 3 days ago, Morrison continued, our deep space research team captured this specimen. It's the first time anyone has managed to take a shadow stalker alive. He paused, letting the information sink in. We've lost 12 colonies to these things in the past 5 years. Jack leaned forward, studying the hologram. The creature was smaller than he had imagined, maybe the size of a large earth tiger. Its surface seemed to shift and change, adapting to its surroundings like living shadow. Sir, Jack said carefully, why are you showing me this? The unknown scientist stepped forward. Because you're going to be working with it, she said. Her name badge read Dr. Reed. We've already lost 3 researchers trying to study it. Traditional containment methods aren't working. Jack's eyes widened. Lost. You mean? Dead, the head of security cut in bluntly. Thing killed them all. Didn't even take 10 minutes each time. The room fell silent. Jack watched the hologram as the creature paced in its containment cell. There was something about its movements that caught his attention. They weren't random or aggressive. They were methodical. Your record with difficult species is impressive, Morrison said, breaking the silence. You managed to establish communication with the hive mind of Sector 9. You helped us understand the crystal beings of Epsilon. We need that kind of thinking here. Dr. Reed stepped closer to Jack's chair. Previous researchers tried to treat it like an animal. They used force fields, shock barriers, sedation. Nothing worked. We need a different approach. Jack stood up and walked to the hologram. The shadow stalker in the image stopped its pacing, seeming to look directly at him. Those sensor arrays weren't just for hunting. They were too complex to arrange. Has anyone tried turning off the barriers? He asked quietly. The security chief laughed sharply. That's suicide. Maybe, Jack said, still watching the creature. But look at its movement patterns. It's not trying to escape. It's trying to understand. Those aren't the actions of a mindless killer. Morrison exchanged glances with Dr. Reed. That's exactly why we chose you. Stone. You see things others miss. He pressed a button, and the hologram changed to show the containment level blueprints. You have 1 month. If you can't make progress, we'll have to terminate the specimen. The risk is too high to keep it longer. Jack nodded slowly, his mind already working through possibilities. I'll need complete access to all previous research data, and I want the observation room modified. Less military, more research-oriented. Done, Morrison said. But Jack, he waited until Jack looked at him. Be careful. I don't want to add your name to the casualty list. As Jack left the office, his mind was racing with ideas. Others saw a monster, a killer, a threat to be eliminated. But he saw something else, a chance to understand one of the galaxy's most mysterious and feared species, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to change everything humans thought they knew about shadow stalkers. He pulled up the security feeds on his tablet as he walked, watching the creature in real time. Tomorrow, he would meet it face to face. Tonight, he had research to do. Jack stood in the observation room early the next morning, watching the shadow stalker through the reinforced glass. He had spent most of the night reading previous research reports, and one thing was clear. All the other researchers had approached the creature with fear. Fear led to aggressive containment measures, which led to aggressive responses. "Are you sure about this?" Dr. Reed asked from her position at the control panel. She had insisted on being present for his first interaction attempt. Jack nodded, checking his simple equipment one last time. No weapons, no restraints, just some basic scanning tools and a light projector he had modified overnight. "Lower the interior barriers, please." "That's against all safety protocols," she protested. "The barriers are what got the others killed," Jack said quietly. "They made the creature feel trapped and threatened. We need to try something different." Dr. Reed hesitated, then slowly began shutting down the energy barriers that crisscrossed the containment room. The shadow stalker immediately noticed the change. Its sensor arrays pulsed with bright blue light, and it moved to the center of the room, head turning slowly to track the disappearing fields. "Look at that," Jack whispered. "It's not charging the walls. It's observing." The creature's surface rippled, shifting through patterns of light and shadow. Jack had noticed these changes in the security footage, but seeing them in person was different. They weren't random. They seemed almost deliberate. "I'm going in," he announced. "Jack, wait." Dr. Reed started, but he was already at the airlock door. The room's atmosphere had been adjusted to match Earth standard. Jack took a deep breath and stepped inside. The shadow stalker turned to face him immediately, its 6 limbs shifting into a balanced stance. "Not aggressive," Jack noted, "just ready." "Hello there," Jack said softly, staying near the door. "I'm going to call you Midnight, if that's okay." "Seems to fit." The creature's sensor arrays flashed in a complex pattern. Jack activated his light projector, sending a simple pulse of blue light back, similar to what he had seen the creature use. The shadow stalker went completely still. Through his earpiece, he could hear Dr. Reed's sharp intake of breath. "Jack, its bio readings just changed completely." "Good change or bad?" he asked quietly, not taking his eyes off Midnight. I'm not sure. Nothing like the aggressive spikes we saw with the other researchers. It's more like surprise." The shadow stalker, Midnight, took a step forward. Its movement was fluid, almost graceful. Jack held his ground, though his heart was racing. The creature stopped about 10 feet away. Then its surface began to shift, creating patterns of light that mimicked the pulse Jack had sent. "Would you look at that?" Jack breathed. He adjusted his projector and sent another pattern, this one slightly more complex. Midnight's response was immediate. Not only did it copy the pattern, but it added to it, creating a flowing sequence of lights that moved across its body like waves. "Dr. Reed," Jack called, excitement creeping into his voice. "Are you recording this?" "Every second," she replied, sounding equally amazed. This is unprecedented. The patterns it's creating, they're mathematically complex. This isn't just mimicry." Jack slowly sat down on the floor, making himself less threatening. Midnight watched him for a moment, then lowered its body as well, matching his posture. Its sensor arrays continued to pulse gently. "You're not a mindless killer at all, are you?" Jack said softly. "You're trying to talk to us. We just weren't listening." Over the next hour, Jack and Midnight exchanged light patterns back and forth. The creature showed an incredible ability to learn and adapt, each sequence becoming more complex. It never made an aggressive move, though it could have easily reached Jack from its position. When Jack finally left the containment room, Dr. Reed was waiting with wide eyes. "Do you realize what you've just done?" she asked. "You've made first real contact with a shadow stalker. No one has ever. This changes everything we thought we knew about them." Jack smiled, looking back through the window where midnight was still creating patterns of light, as if practicing what it had learned. "We've only scratched the surface," he said, "but I think we've made a good start." In the containment room, Midnight moved closer to the window, its sensors tracking Jack's movement. For the first time since its capture, its patterns showed something new, not fear, not aggression, but curiosity. 2 weeks had passed since Jack's first meeting with Midnight, and the progress they had made was remarkable. The observation room had been transformed into a research center, with screens displaying complex light pattern analyses and behavioral data. Jack sat at his desk, reviewing footage from their latest session when Dr. Reed rushed in. "The station committee wants to shut us down," she said without preamble. Her face was tight with worry. "They say it's too dangerous to continue." Jack stood up quickly. "They can't do that. We're just starting to understand them." He gestured to the main screen where Midnight was creating intricate patterns of light along its body. "Look at this sequence from this morning." The footage showed Midnight reproducing a series of light patterns that matched old shipping routes, information Jack had shared during their last session. The creature hadn't just memorized the patterns, it had organized them by date and importance. "That's not just communication," Jack explained. "That's complex problem solving. Midnight isn't just smart. It's teaching us about its species." A soft chime interrupted them. On the main screen, Midnight had moved to the center of its room and was creating a new pattern, one they hadn't seen before. Jack grabbed his tablet and rushed to the containment room, Dr. Reed following close behind. Inside, Midnight's display had become more intense. The patterns flowing across its body showed images that looked like star systems, but arranged in a way Jack hadn't seen on any star chart. "This is incredible," Dr. Reed whispered, her earlier worry forgotten as she recorded the display. "It's showing us its home territory." Jack moved closer to Midnight, which had become comfortable enough with him to allow proximity. The creature's sensors tracked him, but its posture remained relaxed. As Jack watched, the pattern changed to show what looked like multiple shadow stalkers moving together in complex formations. "They're pack hunters," Jack said suddenly, understanding dawning on his face. "No, more than that. They're a collective. Look at how they move together." He pointed to the shifting patterns. "Those aren't attack formations. They're protection patterns." Dr. Reed studied the display intently. "Protection. But all our encounters with them have been aggressive." "Because we approached them wrong," Jack replied, excitement building in his voice. "Think about it. Every documented attack happened when we entered their space suddenly, with ships and weapons. We looked like threats." He turned to Midnight. "They were protecting their territories, weren't they?" Midnight's surface rippled in response, and new patterns formed, showing scenes of ships entering their space, followed by defensive formations. The meaning was clear. "The 3 researchers who died," Jack continued, "they all tried to contain and control. They triggered defensive responses." He looked at Dr. Reed. "We need to show this to the committee. The shadow stalkers aren't mindless killers. They're highly intelligent beings with a complex social structure." Just then, Director Morrison's voice came over the intercom. "Stone, Reed, report to the main conference room immediately. The committee is waiting." Jack looked at Midnight, who had moved closer to the window. "We'll be back," he promised. The creature's sensors pulsed, and what they had learned was an acknowledgement pattern. As they hurried to the conference room, Dr. Reed spoke quickly. "Jack, even with this evidence, they might not listen. The fear of shadow stalkers is deeply ingrained." "Then we'll make them listen," Jack replied firmly. "Midnight has shown us more about their species in 2 weeks than we learned in 5 years of conflict. This could change everything, not just for us, but for them too." They reached the conference room doors. Inside, they could see the stern faces of the committee members waiting. Jack took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. He had to make them understand that this wasn't just about scientific discovery. It was about breaking through centuries of misunderstanding and fear. "Ready?" Dr. Reed asked, her hand on the door panel. Jack nodded, thinking of Midnight's complex patterns and the trust they had built. Time to show them that sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't the creature we fear. It's the fear itself. The station's emergency alarms blared to life at 300 hours, jolting Jack awake in his quarters. Red warning lights pulsed along the corridors as he rushed toward the control center, still pulling on his uniform jacket. "Status report," he called out as he entered the main control room. The scene inside was chaos. Officers running between stations, warning lights flashing on multiple screens. Director Morrison turned to him, face grim. "Main reactors going critical. Some kind of cascade failure in the cooling system." He pointed to a diagram showing dangerous red zones spreading across the station's power grid. "We've got maybe 2 hours before total failure." "Evacuation orders?" Jack asked, studying the emergency displays. "Already given, but there's a problem." Morrison's face darkened. "The emergency protocols. They require termination of all research specimens before evacuation." Jack's blood ran cold. "No, you can't terminate Midnight. It's not up for debate, Stone." The security chief cut in, stepping forward. "Protocol is clear. We can't risk a shadow stalker getting loose during evacuation." The station shuddered, and another alarm joined the cacophony. Dr. Reed rushed in, her tablet displaying more warning signals. "The cooling system failure is spreading faster than predicted. We got less than an hour now." Jack's mind raced. Over the past weeks, Midnight had shown intelligence far beyond what anyone had expected. The creature understood complex problems, demonstrated advanced reasoning, and even showed concern when Jack had once cut his hand during an experiment. "What if Midnight could help?" he said suddenly. The security chief laughed sharply. "Help? It's a predator, Stone, not a repair crew. Its species evolved in environments we can barely survive in," Jack argued. "The sensor arrays they use for hunting can detect structural weaknesses, temperature variations, energy fluctuations, everything we need to find the root of this problem." Another violent shudder ran through the station. Director Morrison grabbed a console for support. "We don't have time for this. Security team is already heading to containment." "Give me 15 minutes, Jack pleaded. "That's all I need. If I'm wrong, you can follow protocols. But if I'm right, we might save both the station and years of irreplaceable research." Morrison looked at the failing systems, then back at Jack. 10 minutes, he said finally. "Not 1 second more." Jack ran, through corridors filled with evacuating crew members, down emergency-lit hallways, all the way to the containment level. When he reached Midnight's room, the creature was already at the window, its sensor arrays pulsing with agitated patterns. "You can feel it, can't you?" Jack said as he entered the room. "The station's dying." Midnight's surface rippled with complex patterns. Fear, Jack realized. Not for itself, but for the danger to everyone. Just like its species protected their territory, Midnight had come to see the station as its new home. "We need your help," Jack said, approaching the creature. "The station's reactor is failing. We need to find the source of the problem, but the radiation levels are too high for humans to get close." Midnight's patterns shifted, showing understanding. The creature moved closer to Jack, then did something unprecedented. It lowered its body in a clear invitation. "You want me to ride you?" Jack asked, amazed. The creature's patterns pulsed in confirmation. Jack's communicator crackled. 7 minutes, Stone," Morrison's voice warned. Taking a deep breath, Jack climbed onto Midnight's back. The creature's surface was smooth but firm, with slight ridges that provided secure handholds. As soon as Jack was settled, Midnight moved. Faster than he had ever seen it move before, but with a smoothness that kept its rider secure. They raced through the station's corridors, Midnight's sensors scanning everything they passed. Other crew members pressed against walls in shock as they saw a human riding what they had always feared as the galaxy's deadliest predator. "We need to get to the main reactor level," Jack said. Midnight's patterns pulsed in acknowledgement as they headed deeper into the dying station, towards the growing danger that threatened them all. Together, Human and Shadow Stalker moved as one, racing against time to save not just themselves, but everyone aboard Omega-7. And in that moment, Jack realized that this crisis might do what all his research couldn't: show everyone that the most feared creature in the galaxy could also be its greatest ally. The reactor level's emergency doors were sealed, their warning lights casting an eerie red glow in the deserted corridor. Jack's tablet showed radiation levels far beyond human safety limits. "The core chamber is through there," Jack said, pointing at the sealed doors. "But the radiation would kill me in minutes." Midnight's sensor arrays pulsed rapidly as it scanned the area. The creature's surface rippled with patterns that Jack had learned to recognize as problem-solving. Suddenly, Midnight's entire body began to emit a soft, blue-white glow. "Dr. Reed," Jack spoke into his communicator, "are you seeing this?" "Incredible," her voice crackled back. "The Shadow Stalker's outer layer is generating some kind of energy field. It's absorbing the radiation." Midnight moved closer to Jack, its field extending to encompass him. Jack felt a slight tingling sensation, but no harm. The creature had created a protective bubble around them both. 30 minutes until critical failure," Director Morrison's voice warned through the comm. "Whatever you're going to do, do it fast." Midnight pressed its sensor arrays against the sealed doors, then backed up slightly. Understanding the creature's intent, Jack entered his emergency override code. The doors slid open with a hiss of pressurized air. The reactor core chamber was a maze of pipes and conduits, all centered around the massive fusion reactor that powered the station. Emergency lights flashed everywhere, and warning sirens created a deafening noise. But Midnight moved with purpose, its sensors scanning everything as they went deeper into the chamber. "The cooling system failure is spreading from somewhere in here," Jack said, checking his tablet's readings through the creature's protective field. "But we can't pinpoint the source." Midnight suddenly stopped, its head turning toward a section of wall that looked perfectly normal. Its pattern changed to show urgent, pulsing waves. "Wait," Jack studied his readings. "There's something behind that panel, something that shouldn't be there." The creature's surface shifted, and one of its limbs transformed into a precision tool. With surprising gentleness, it removed the wall panel, revealing a hidden device attached to the main cooling lines. "Morrison," Jack called into his comm. "We found it. Some kind of sabotage device. It's interfering with the cooling system controls." "Can you disable it?" Morrison asked urgently. Jack studied the device, but its components were complex and unfamiliar. "I don't know enough about it. One wrong move could trigger a faster meltdown." Midnight's patterns shifted again, showing sequences that Jack recognized from their communication practice sessions. The creature was asking for trust. "The Shadow Stalker's sensor arrays," Dr. Reed's voice came through. "They can detect energy patterns, if it can see how the device works." "Do it," Jack said to Midnight. "I trust you." The creature's sensors focused intensely on the device. Its surface rippled with complex calculations, showing Jack exactly how the energy flowed through the sabotage unit. Then, with precise movements, Midnight extended two limbs transformed into fine manipulators. Everyone watched through Jack's camera feed as the Shadow Stalker, a species known only for destruction, worked with microscopic precision to disarm the device. Its movements were perfect, each adjustment timed exactly right. With a final click, the device powered down. The reactor's warning sirens began to quiet, and the emergency lights steadied. "Cooling systems responding," Dr. Reed reported excitedly. "Core temperature dropping to normal levels." Cheers erupted over the comm system. Jack reached out, and placed his hand on Midnight's surface, feeling the gentle vibration of its satisfied patterns beneath his palm. "You did it," he said softly. "You saved everyone." Midnight's patterns shifted to show what Jack now recognized as happiness, but also something more, pride in their shared achievement. The creature had proved itself not just to Jack, but to everyone. As they made their way back through the station, crew members who had been evacuating stopped to stare, but this time their faces showed wonder instead of fear. They had just witnessed the galaxy's most feared predator perform an act of incredible precision and care to save their lives. "I think," Jack said into his comm, "we need to completely rewrite everything we thought we knew about shadow stalkers." In response, Midnight's pattern showed a new sequence, one that looked remarkably like laughter. The station's main conference room was packed. 2 days after the reactor crisis, everyone wanted to hear Jack's report about Midnight. Director Morrison had even arranged for several high-ranking Space Command officials to attend via hologram. Jack stood at the front of the room, with Dr. Reed beside him managing the display screens. Most surprisingly, Midnight was also present, staying calmly in a corner of the room while crew members cast nervous but curious glances its way. "What we discovered during the crisis," Jack began, "was just the beginning. After studying the patterns Midnight showed us during the reactor repair, we made an incredible breakthrough in understanding shadow stalker communication." The main screen lit up with recordings of Midnight's light patterns. Dr. Reed stepped forward to explain. "These aren't just simple signals," she said. "They're a complete language. Each pattern contains layers of meaning, emotions, memories, and most importantly, history." Jack nodded and turned to Midnight. "Show them," he said softly. The creature's surface began to glow, creating patterns more complex than any they'd seen before. The room fell silent as images formed in the light. Scenes from the shadow stalker's past. "What you're seeing," Jack explained, "is their original purpose. Shadow stalkers weren't evolved as predators. They were peacekeepers." The patterns showed groups of shadow stalkers moving through ancient alien cities, maintaining order, protecting the weak, solving complex mechanical problems. Their ability to adapt their bodies, combined with their advanced sensors, made them perfect for this role. But something went wrong, Jack continued. Their civilization faced a crisis. We're still working on understanding exactly what happened. But in the chaos that followed, many species began to fear the shadow stalkers. They were hunted, forced to defend themselves. Midnight's patterns shifted to show darker scenes. Attacks, fear, the species scattered across space. The creature's surface rippled with what they now recognized as sadness. Over generations, Dr. Reed added, they lost their connection to their original purpose. They became what everyone feared them to be, isolated, defensive, seeing every approach as a potential threat. An admiral's hologram spoke up. "Are you suggesting that all our conflicts with them were based on a misunderstanding?" "Not exactly," Jack replied. "The attacks were real, but they were defensive, not aggressive. We entered their space without understanding their nature, seeing them as monsters rather than intelligent beings trying to protect their territories." Midnight moved forward then, its patterns showing something new. A sequence of lights that demonstrated how shadow stalkers could work with humans. It showed scenes of them helping with space exploration, solving technical problems, even assisting with planetary colonization. "Their abilities are incredible," Jack explained. "The radiation shield Midnight created during the crisis. That's just one example. They can adapt their bodies to survive in almost any environment, detect problems our sensors miss, and perform repairs with microscopic precision." The room burst into discussion. Some officers argued about security concerns, while others saw the potential benefits. Through it all, Midnight remained calm, its patterns showing patience and hope. Director Morrison raised his hand for silence. "The reactor saboteur still hasn't been caught. Without Midnight's help, we would have lost the station. I think that proves shadow stalkers can be more than just enemies." "What are you proposing?" one of the admirals asked. Jack stepped forward. A partnership program. Working with Midnight, we can learn to communicate with other shadow stalkers. Show them we're not threats. Maybe even help them reconnect with their original purpose as peacekeepers. He turned to look at Midnight, whose patterns now showed something that looked like stars and ships moving together in harmony. We've spent years fighting what we didn't understand, Jack said. Maybe it's time we tried something different. After all, isn't that what humanity does best? Finding friendship in unexpected places. The room fell quiet as everyone watched Midnight's hopeful display of future cooperation. The creature that had once been their most feared enemy was now showing them a path to a better future, if they were brave enough to take it. 6 months had passed since the reactor crisis, and Space Station Omega-7 looked very different now. The old containment level had been transformed into the Interspecies Cooperation Center, its stark military design replaced with open spaces and advanced communication equipment. Jack stood in the main training area, watching as 3 new shadow stalkers interacted with their human partners. After the success with Midnight, Space Command had cautiously approved a pilot program for human shadow stalker cooperation. It hadn't been easy convincing both sides to trust each other, but the results were worth it. Training Group 2 is showing remarkable progress, Dr. Reed said, joining him at the observation window. Her tablet displayed charts tracking the various teams' development, though nobody's quite matched your bond with Midnight yet. As if summoned by its name, Midnight appeared beside them, its surface showing patterns of greeting and affection. The creature had grown even more expressive over the months, developing new ways to communicate complex ideas through its light displays. That's because they're all trying too hard, Jack replied, smiling as Midnight's patterns shifted to show agreement. They're still thinking about techniques and protocols. They need to learn to trust their instincts, like we did. A young ranger named Tom was working with his shadow stalker partner, trying to solve a complex mechanical puzzle. The creature's patterns showed frustration, but not anger, a crucial difference from their old defensive responses. Remember, Jack called out to Tom, they're not just following your lead. Work together. Let them show you their way of seeing the problem. Tom nodded and stepped back, allowing his partner to scan the puzzle with its sensor arrays. The shadow stalker's patterns change, showing possible solutions, and Tom's face lit up with understanding. That's it, he exclaimed as they solved the puzzle together. I see what you were trying to tell me. Director Morrison entered the training area, accompanied by several officials wearing Space Command insignia. Jack recognized them as members of the Xenological Relations Committee, the ones who would decide the future of the program. Quite a change from 6 months ago, Morrison said, gesturing around the room. Back then, we thought we'd have to evacuate the station. Now we're running the most advanced interspecies cooperation program in human space. One of the committee members stepped forward, watching as another team successfully completed their training exercise. The results are impressive, she admitted. The Shadow Stalker teams have already helped prevent 3 major space accidents in other sectors. Their ability to detect problems before they become critical is unprecedented. Midnight moved to the center of the room, its surface beginning to glow with a special pattern, one it had been working on with Jack. The display showed scenes from their successful missions, shadow stalkers and humans working together to repair damaged ships, explore dangerous environments, and protect colonies from natural disasters. But it's more than just practical benefits, Jack said, walking to stand beside his partner. We're learning from each other. The shadow stalkers are rediscovering their heritage as peacekeepers, and we're learning to look past our fears to see the potential in those we once considered enemies. The committee members watched as Midnight's display shifted to show future possibilities. Joint exploration missions, new colonies protected by shadow stalker guardians, peaceful first contact with other species guided by their combined wisdom. The galaxy's a big place, Jack continued. Too big for any one species to face alone. Maybe that's why we found each other, not to fight, but to help each other grow. Dr. Reed checked her tablet and smiled. The new training groups are showing a 95% success rate. At this pace, we could expand the program to other stations within a year. The committee members huddled together, discussing quietly. Finally, their leader turned to Director Morrison. The program is approved for full implementation. You have our authorization to begin recruiting more teams immediately. Jack felt Midnight's happiness through the patterns flowing across its surface. Around them, the other shadow stalkers picked up on the emotion, their own patterns joining in a beautiful display of light and color. Ready to help train the next generation? Jack asked his partner. Midnight's response was a complex pattern that showed excitement, determination, and something uniquely Shadow Stalker, a sense of coming home. Together, they had helped two species find a better way forward, proving that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from conquering our fears, but from learning to see past them, to the friendship waiting on the other side.